remember I told you God works miracle for me before.
And understand at this point, before taking the products, not only did she have the stage 4 breast and lung cancer, also she had lose her ability to drive, right? Her vision. So her vision was slowly deteriorating. So my mom has had a home in Miami and a home in Naples. Naples is the west side of Florida, the west side of South Florida. So she would drive from Naples to Miami over and over and over and over. But at this point with the cancer, she couldn't, right? So as she started taking these things about 4 to 6 months in, she was like, I can drive again. I'm like, what do you mean you can drive again? She's like, I can drive again. I'm going to Naples. I'm driving to Naples. I'm like, huh? So the cool part about it was like, okay, look, we got to bring Enqi down. We got to bring Enqi down. So boom, we bring Enqi down to South Florida. He does a lecture, and he centers the lecture because my stepfather's a preacher, and like my mom is like obviously heavy because my stepfather's a preacher, so obviously she's like his support in that sense. So as Enqi's coming down to do the lectures, we're doing the lectures in churches, right? But Enqi showed them biblically why, like, okay, this is why these things are working, and here's it biblically in scripture, which was quite genius to me, right? So I was like, oh, okay, cool, very cool. And then everybody started to see the progress with my mom. And one thing that was important too, everybody knew she couldn't drive anymore. Everybody knew she couldn't drive anymore because, so some Sundays, like if she's in Naples, she wouldn't be able to come down because either my stepfather was tired, he couldn't drive. So usually they would switch off driving, and the drive is about an hour and a half, an hour 45, depending on how fast you're going, right? So now she's driving back and forth, and everybody was looking at her like, what are you doing driving? So when they knew Enqi was coming down, listen, Enqi was the American healer. But almost, it was almost godlike when Enqi came down because everybody saw and knew what was happening with my mom. And then the beautiful part about it, not only did they know, they saw the deterioration and then the restoration.
All right, so here's the thing. In order to be a good teacher, you have to be a good student, meaning you have to constantly be studying whatever your craft is, to constantly be developing, to constantly have new things to share. So one of the things that I learned was that cancer and diabetes are, you cannot separate the two. In order to properly address cancer or diabetes, you kind of have to approach them, either of them, you have to kind of approach them like major and minor, right? If you're dealing with diabetes, even if the person hasn't expressed any cancer, whatever, you still have to move cautiously if you're dealing with somebody with cancer issues, because they run on the same, they run on the opposite scale of the same energy system. It all comes down to this production of ATP and insulin that you're looking at, right? So the key that you have to understand is that the insulin receptors are not actually produced on the cells or populated until the insulin and the glucose is released, etc., etc. So high levels of insulin dictate lots and lots of insulin receptors, and if the insulin receptors, if your body doesn't have a chance to clean itself, right, after each meal, meaning after you eat, if your body doesn't have a chance to properly process and totally metabolize all of your meal, all the way down to your last little bits of glucose and insulin, you're going to have issues. And so when you have residual insulin receptors constantly building, that's like cancer cells in training, because cancer cells have I think maybe up to like, I don't know, it's crazy. Some numbers say as low as 10 times the amount of insulin receptors. Some say as high as 50 or 100 times the amount of insulin receptors cancer cells have. So understand, when you're watching and you're seeing this story and you're like, wait a minute, I thought this was a story about diabetes. Understand that a cancer cell is a cell that is behaving in such manner because it has a higher amount of insulin receptors. And all of the behavior that separates a cancer cell from a regular cell centers around insulin metabolism.